Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where our mission is to provide education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. USA Global TV and Radio connects you with experts and audiences all around the world every single day to help you succeed in business and to live a richer life. Visit us at usaglobaltv.com to learn about career and life-changing training and mentoring programs like the Listening Mentor. Subscribe to our newsletter to stay informed about our special programs and offers. Discover how you can become a guest on one of our shows or a host or producer of a USA Global TV and Radio show of your very own. That's USA Global TV and Radio, where the doctor is always in.
Hi, everyone. Welcome home to USA Global TV and Radio. I'm Dr. JACALYN KERBECK, and our show today is Have I Got a Course for You? This is a relatively new program where we are featuring people who have courses who want to provide education to our network. That would be you. So today we have a very special guest joining us from the UK. Before we bring him out, I want to welcome Mr. Red O'Loughlin, who is my co-host. If you don't know him, you need to reach out to him immediately. Go over to LinkedIn and look for Red O'Loughlin. Not only is he a TV show host, a radio show host, he is also one of our expert presenters on Talking Heads. He is a publisher. He has helped me with every single one of my books is either an Amazon #1 bestseller or an Amazon #1 new release. And it is because of this man. He is a marketing and creative genius. Let's welcome him to the show. He's an author himself, and he's also an expert on longevity. Hello, Red.
Howdy, Dr. JACALYN. Good to see you again.
Nice to see you as well. And, you know, we have our background from the wise ones, which made sense for me today for the show because courses and education can help people be wiser. And we have a fabulous guest backstage. Tell us what your thoughts are when it comes to continuous education.
Well, I'm not sure how much you know, but I have 5 academic degrees, ironically, all in different subjects. I've already mentioned once upon a time that my first degree was chemistry because I fell in love with it. I just absolutely became enamored. I didn't get a chance to practice it after I got my degree because I got an invitation to Vietnam. Then I came back out and I got involved in statistics. I got involved in some other stuff. And just one thing led to another. And by the time everything was done, I had a bug of wanting to learn. I've traveled to 61 countries in the world, thanks to the Navy. Got a chance to really enjoy a lot of different environments, cultures, people, languages, foods, just a lot of learning. So you have a continuous learning, not only from an academic perspective, but just from a practical perspective in life. I've got 7 professional certifications, all in, well, somewhat related in the statistical, quality, logistics, reliability ends of things, but more almost all on the technical side. And so I'm constantly in a learning mode. I just published a book on how to write and publish your book for free. And part of that, I was just ready to push the button and go. And with the Chat GPT coming out, I said, I really need to add a little bit more there. So I ended up giving 4 lectures on how to use artificial intelligence as an author or how to improve your health with it. And I added a section in the book, two sections actually, so that I could bring the book up to date saying, how can I use artificial intelligence to help write and publish my book? So I'm in a constant learning mode. I have a what you call Talking Head show on the USA Global TV and Radio Network. And we're always covering some kind of topic dealing with health and wellness. I research the human body at the cellular level, chemically speaking. I look for cause and effect relationships. Treat a cause, fix a problem. Treat a symptom, and you'll always be treating symptoms. So I'm looking for some ways to help people by saying, hey, this causes that, stop that, and that'll stop. And that's the gist. So we just finished an 8-part series on cancer. If you haven't seen it yet, please go to the USA Global TV and Radio Network archive on YouTube, and it's there for your perusal. And we're getting ready to start one on basically the science of weight management, and that'll be starting up this week. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to our host, Dr. JACALYN.
Thank you so much, Red. I'm excited to bring out our guest. Before we do, I have one comment, which is thank you for telling me about ChatGPT because I have embraced it fully. As you know, I'm a lifelong learner as well. So let me tell you a little bit about our guest. He is a friend of Philip Sykes and the British School of Excellence. And, you know, I have the utmost respect for Philip and for the incredible alumni that graduate from his Train the Trainer program. Philip introduced me to Anthony Willoughby, and immediately there was a connection. We've had 2 or 3 calls, I believe, and I just am so inspired by the work that he's done. He's been interviewed by Diane Sawyer. That's right, Diane Sawyer from 60 Minutes. He's a TEDx speaker. His name is Anthony Willoughby, and he is the founder of the Nomadic School of Business, where they prepare leaders to thrive in an unpredictable world. Let's welcome him to the program. Hello, Anthony. Nice to have you.
Dr. JACALYN, fantastic being with you. This is wonderful taking our conversations to being here. So brilliant news. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I know the answer, but I would love to spotlight you. What is that visual in the background?
That is Mongolian horsemen coming towards me. And they're pretty close. And they literally sort of went straight over me after that photograph was taken. But what I really love about nomads is they have absolute clarity, a sense of purpose and a sense of an identity. And that has really been my quest in life, to understand, you know, what is freedom? What is the freedom of choice to shape our own destiny? And really, what do we have to learn about ourselves that we've really rather forgotten? So that's a bit of a long introduction, but that was taken in Mongolia a few years, about 4 or 5 years ago.
Thank you so much, Anthony. And so, as you know, the title of this show is Have I Got a Course for You? And you're going to be telling us about the education opportunities that you can provide to people. But you've had quite an interesting life. You've lived many places and you've met many people, and you've been able to go into huge organizations and meet with their leadership to actually transform the way that their company was doing business. Can you tell us more about any of these areas?
Well, I can tell you more about that, but I think I've got to start having listened to Red's discussion on his degrees. I was exceptionally lucky at school because when I was 17, my housemaster, he took me aside. He said, Anthony, we need to talk about your future. I thought this is quite exciting. He said, let's get one thing absolutely clear. You are far, far, far too stupid to go to university. And I remember at that moment, that magnificent sense of freedom, of release, and the sort of the mind numbing of education, the pointlessness of it. And what I was very lucky was that he said, would I like an exchange scholarship? Would I like to apply for one for America? So I left a school in England where they teach effortless insincerity and arrogance without any substance. And as you can see from our Prime Minister, absolutely no moral fibers whatsoever. And I went to America, and it was an incredible time. Some of you older people may remember Kent State, the moratorium. I watched Apollo 13 blast off, and I started hitchhiking. And it was this incredible sense the world was open to me. And that sense of freedom and identity, of putting one's thumb out. I've hitched coast to coast. I've hitched across Australia. I've hitched across Tibet and along the Silk Road. So for me, it's a lifelong learning. But the most important thing is to learn about how to trust yourself. Because no amount of knowledge, no amount of anything, if you don't trust yourself, if you don't have a sense of an identity, if you don't have a sense of purpose, no amount of knowledge is of any use to you whatsoever. And I think what I love about ChatGPT is that finally information and knowledge is open to everybody. Whether it's a 5-year-old child in India or a professor at Stanford, The only difference is the child in India has got ambition, purpose, energy, and they're going to do something with it. So for me, what we need to do is to go in search of wisdom. And that is what I've spent my life doing, is looking at what do I need to learn about myself and the laws of Mother Nature if I want my freedom of choice to give me a sense of identity. So again, my apologies, Dr. JACALYN and Red, for a rather long answer.
Anthony, one of the things I really loved in doing a little bit of research about you was, and you just briefly touched on it, substance with or without arrogance. And I thought that was such a unique ability to, I think you said it was like a aha moment, epiphany, when you finally met the Messiah and you kind of saw, wow, there really is something different. And that part just kind of, that just stuck with me.
And you're absolutely right. I mean, that was really the beginning of it. I mean, I left England, on the Trans-Siberian when I was 22. I got a one-way ticket on the Trans-Siberian Express, and I arrived in Yokohama by boat. And that was really sort of in search of a Rolex, I would say. That, I wanted to get a bigger, brassier Rolex than my father. And after about 5 years, I had it, and I'd been going out with a girlfriend. So I thought I'd go and live in Singapore, because I rather thought that, I was so successful, everybody would love me. And all of a sudden they didn't. And so I said to my girlfriend, Sue, come and join me. And she said, no, you're joking. I'm having fun in Tokyo. And all of a sudden I realized I might own the Rolex, but actually I had absolutely no purpose or identity. And I started trying to see, what else do we really, really need in life? And this sort of leads into the camel safari I was on in Kenya. And a couple of times I got lost in the bush, and I was absolutely terrified that I was going to get eaten. But each evening I would see these Maasai, and they would just wander into our little encampment. And as you said, what I saw is they had substance, they had humility, they had humanity, and they had this magnificent presence about them. And I thought, wow, why don't I have that? Why wasn't I taught just to be naturally comfortable and confident? So that was the beginning of thinking, well, what is it that we've really lost in the West? It's all around what we own. So I thought I'd go off to Papua New Guinea. And so when I got back to Tokyo, I went to the Papua New Guinea embassy. And that's when I met Joseph Nombre, the Papua New Guinea ambassador to Tokyo, who actually remembers first contact. And I said, sir, what is it you've got that we've lost? Sort of, what's the secret to life? He looked at me bemused and said, I really don't know. Wouldn't you like to go to my village? So it was really sort of about 3 months later, there I was in the highlands of Papua New Guinea. And it was sort of, I started to see people there with presence, but I started to learn a bit more. And I started to learn that, they have big feathers, but, a big man has many feathers, but, a bigger man can hand out his feathers. And I started to say, well, that's fascinating. Then they talked about the spear. You have to earn it. You can't buy it. You can't sell it. You can't give it away. You have to accept the responsibility of the spear. And, I can ask you, Red, you know people who hand out feathers, and people who keep them, don't you?
Absolutely.
You know people who've got a real spear that they've earned, and people who've got a plastic one because they haven't earned the authority that goes with it, right?
You're absolutely correct.
And so it started to make it realize that actually deep inside our brains haven't changed for, tens of thousands of years. So actually our instincts are still there. So I started to learn from that. Was when I got back to Tokyo, I asked the ambassador, what is the single most important thing in his life? Thinking he'd say, my house, my car, my everything, what I own. And he just looked at me and he said, it is my territory. And then he drew a map on the napkin. I remember it well. And for the next 2 hours, he talked about his culture, his identity, and his purpose. And he then wrote on it, I know my territory, therefore I know my duty, which is to expand the territory, protect the territory, So it started to make me realize that our identity for the first 99.9% of human existence has come from what are we protecting, what are we contributing, and where are we actually earning our spears and our feathers. And it started to make me realize, I say, that we have no concept of this. It is all simply thrown at us. What we own, in theory, the quicker that any system can get us into debt, then they can control us. And so it started to make me think about what is freedom, what is identity, and why have we got it so wrong?
I think it's fascinating. The things that you're talking about should be so innate. They should be just, but we get so consumed with things and status and who has more and who's gone more places and who has bigger Rolexes and who has more Rolexes that we forget when it was the days of the cavemen, for example, and they had to forge, they had to fish, they had to grow, and they had to protect what it is that they had. And I really feel, especially in this country, you're talking about your country there, but in this country, we have a lot of issues that you would never think we'd be where we are today. So what is the answer, Anthony, about how do we get back to focusing on hunting, protecting, and growing as basic human needs and rights?
Well, obviously, we can't go right back to it, but I think we can start connecting our brain to what it was actually designed to do. And this concept of territory, I first had it literally, that is 40 years ago. So when I first heard about territory, that's when I started going off on different journeys and expeditions. And then in the 80s, I opened the first outdoor team building and leadership development companies. And that's when I saw you can build a team quite easily. You give them some beer, give them some tasks, and they all love each other. But they all sort of say, where do I fit in? Where do I belong? Where am I recognized? Why am I not given leadership? So I thought, well, and Thomson and Reuters were about to start working together. And they said, look, we don't want a team building thing because we don't know each other. What we want is to understand each other, what we're trying to do. So I said, look, can I try something with you? And the chap said, yeah, of course you can. So I'd got some maps drawn by people in Papua New Guinea. And I said, look, these people in New Guinea know exactly what they're hunting, protecting, and growing. And they know the community and who sits around their fire. Here's a blank sheet of paper. Will you draw your territory? And that's what I have found fascinating. That's what I've been doing for the last 25 years on 5 continents, asking thousands of people, whether they're executives in homeless centers, billionaires in America. And everybody I have discovered can draw a map of how they see their world, their rivers, their mountains, the swamps they need to get through, the trees that they need to grow. What do they have to grow? And what I've discovered with just these very, very few icons of, what are you hunting in your life? Really, do you know it? And yes, you want a Ferrari. No, that's not what you're hunting. So what do you want to be recognized for? What is your quest that you want people to say, wow, Dr. JACALYN, your vision is phenomenal, which it is. I know what you're hunting. You're hunting to give people a voice, to give them identity. That's what I believe you're hunting. And Red, I'm sure you're just the same. And therefore, what are you protecting? Well, you're protecting your community. What are you growing? You're growing the strength of that community. And what I've discovered, it doesn't matter who you ask. Absolutely anybody can draw a map showing the rivers, the mountains, and the swamps. And what are they hunting, protecting, and growing? And then you ask, so who sits around your fire? Who really, really sits around your fire? And why are they there? And what do they bring you? Wisdom, knowledge, and experience. Do they bring you those feathers, or do they bring you the spear? They take that responsibility. And I've discovered that just with this simple way, this simple approach, that anybody can start to talk about what is really, really important to them. And that's what I've found fascinating, because it crosses all cultures, all barriers, all languages, because deep, deep, deep inside of us, I believe we're tapping into our natural instincts that have been restricted and removed by Western civilization, which is, get a Ferrari, get in debt, and then you'll be beholden to the government.
So true.
Absolutely. Anthony, I'm really intrigued about this map concept, and you and I have spoken about it before. So how is it that you work with organizations, and you've worked with some of the biggest names in the world, actually? Yeah. For people out there thinking, wow, I'm interested in this concept, how does it work?
It's simple. I mean, it's sort of simple and complicated. It's taken me many, many decades to perfect its simplicity. But we really just give people, we ask them, who are they hunting? What is their territory? And then we simply ask people to draw a map. And obviously we then help them facilitate that map about what are they hunting? What are they protecting? What are they growing? Where are the rivers in their life? What do they need to do? And just through this methodology, people can start to have conversations. Because for me, I've just been talking at the European Mentoring and Coaching Conference in Prague. Because how can anybody coach or consult anybody if they don't actually know what that organization is hunting, protecting, and growing? Because in theory, we need to know what our clients are actually doing. So whether we're working one-on-one with individuals to work out what is important, their priorities through a coaching experience or mentoring, or we're working with a team, once you've got everybody's maps together, the rivers, they've shared that, then you start to get a universal language that crosses all cultures, because in Korean, Japanese, or anywhere else, a river is a river. And so you can start to create that language. So we work with organizations, they get in contact with us and they explain, this is what we'd like to achieve. How could the map then stimulate the conversations to build the trust and the clarity and that sense of purpose and identity that the organization is seeking? And then we facilitate that. And that's what we want to do, is to train other people up into that, using that methodology, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
I noticed that when I was working in corporate world, the companies I worked for would always provide courses for you to be better this, better that, know the system, whatever it may happen to be. And sometimes they would actually get involved with the psychological profile of the individual, so you knew your organization.
Yeah.
However, it was always for the organization. What little I learned about me wasn't sufficient enough that when I left that corporate world and I became an entrepreneur, I didn't have the skills that I really needed. Yeah, I knew a little bit about myself, but it was a brave new world that I had to go into, because a lot of the things that was always taken care of by that department or that person or whatever, those ancillary things were just there. Yeah, well, those are jobs. But the thing that I really like about what you're saying is that if you understand where you are in your world, which is the map and the mountains and the swamps and everything else, that brings a lot of clarity regardless of where you're at, whether it's an individual entrepreneur, team leader, a manager, it doesn't matter, because all of that, it astounds me that it's that you, as you said, you took decades to make it this simple. And that's the part that I'm finding. It is so simple, but it's interesting.
Yeah, and I think it is. But Red, you've landed planes on aircraft carriers, right?
Not actually, no. The airplane I chose was too big to go on an aircraft carrier.
Anyway, you know what it's like to land an aircraft, right? Yeah. I've done a fair amount of skydiving, etc. You either skydive or you land the plane. You don't half do it.
Yeah.
And I think this is what people forget. They think they go on a course on leadership and they can therefore lead. I mean, our prime minister wrote a book on Churchill's leadership abilities, and somehow he thought some of that would rub off on him. And, it doesn't. And I think at the core of everything we're talking about is people must have that sense of courage. They really must. You can't just go and buy wolf spray for sheep. You know, it's a bit like going and buying a book on how to climb Everest, and then you read all the books about it, but you never actually get up and do it. So, you know, these, I believe, are skills for life. And it's fascinating working with 12-year-olds. We've just been running sessions in Dubai and Scotland, and I've sat down with these children. I've just said, what is a meaningful life? What do you really want to do? Not you want to become an accountant or a lawyer. What do you want to be known for? And it's just fascinating watching them draw the maps of the rivers they need to cross and how they can help each other. And that sort of natural, innate ambition that fundamentally any child in Africa, you know, absolutely takes it for granted, because every single thing I'm saying is you sat down with any Maasai, Sami reindeer herder, North American Indian, Aboriginal, this is just blindingly obvious to them. You know, you've got to contribute, you've got to be brave. And what I love about Kenya is sort of the Maasai, you've got respect, responsibility, and courage. Those are the core values that you're taught as a child. And then your authority, your responsibility, and your accountability changes as you move through your different ages on life. And that's what I think we need to focus on. Yes, you need a map. A map will help you talk to each other. But then what are you going to do together? And that's where we want to work with coaches. That's where we'd love to work with Dr. JACALYN and Red, because what we can do is we can create the insights and the clarity. But what we really can't do is the activation and the guidance. So that's what we then want to partner with people who, once they've got the map, the operational map, then they can start to help them on what they actually have to do, just as you would be using military maps in Vietnam or wherever else you're chasing submarines.
Thank you, Anthony. I just have a follow-up to what you said, because it reminded me of something when I was in corporate. I remember that the key question that we were told to ask senior leaders was, what's keeping you up at night, sir, madam? And what I found, and I think what our executives found, was when we would ask this question, the leader would give the information, and we're trying to fit it into a box of what it is that we provide. So we're looking for key terms to think, okay, I sell this, I provide that, my service is this, and we're missing the whole conversation because we're making it about us. And so with what you're describing with the map, I'm sure that people, they have to be able to listen, and they have to be able to think about the entire scenario, not just their part of it, not just their river, not just their swamp.
Dr. JACALYN, you're absolutely spot on, because what they have to think about is the whole ecosystem. And the real trouble with business is it's just simply full of jargon. I mean, I've got a magnificent map drawn by the chairman. We're heading for paradise. Everything is fine. We then went the next level down, and all they drew were islands, broken bridges, bullshit bridge, fantasy applications. And the entire organization, there's just no context to organizations. They're meaningless. There is no real understanding. It's just full of jargon and sort of academic gibberish. I mean, it's, what are we hunting? Why are we existing? What is those values? What is the identity of our organization? And it takes courage to deal with it. I'm sure, Red, you've seen it, you know, in the military the entire time. You see courage.
Sometimes it's forced upon you. Sometimes it just happens. But the part that resonated with me when you're talking about the kids, 12 years old, and they're making their map, but that assumes a level of parent, community, church, whatever you want to call their early life, their experiences, their learning, education, whatever. They have some purpose, and they know where they're going to a degree, even as a 4, 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old. But you know, from what I'm observing nowadays, I just don't see that younger, under 10 years of age, getting that direction or getting that experience or exposure It just seems like a lot's left to, oh, here's a cell phone, there's a TV, whatever it may happen to be. It's not as structured. It's not even willy-nilly. It's just left out.
I think you're absolutely right. I think it's completely, totally, and utterly left out because people don't value it. But what I found fascinating is that 8-year-olds, the way they're able to articulate, and this is obviously working with private schools in Dubai and in Scotland, but I've worked with some very deprived schools in theory in Alloa, in just outside Edinburgh, and they could draw their maps, they could explain them, the teachers drew their maps, they had fabulous conversations. And we've got schools that want to put a map in every child's hand, because I think these are genuine life skills. We go through life worried about this. We're always in a swamp, or how do we get out of this swamp? Why have I got myself back in it? I think we've got to teach people from an early age. Every time you go to a new position, you're going through a swamp because you don't know where your points of reference are. So I think these are very important life skills that we need because they're instinctive. And there's now a lot that I'm working with neuroscientists and others that are saying we're actually using the front of the brain, which is where people actually remember something, because it's useful.
Anthony, I think this is fascinating what you're sharing. And Red, thank you for your questions. I have another question which has come up. So when you have a team, whether it's school age, whether it's an organization, doesn't matter. Typically, if I'm drawing my map and the two of you are drawing your maps, maybe there's part of your map that I want, but I'm not going to tell you that I want it. I'm going to come up with a plan of how I'm going to take it. And so even though we're team members, we have our own ambitions and our own drive, but we might not be communicating that. How does this come out, or does it come out in the process that you've created here?
That's a really, really good question. Do keep me small because I want to look at you when I'm sort of chatting about it. But that's a really good question. You can only do mapping if you're working with a leader who's got some courage. So in other words, the leader's got to say, look, in this room, we've got 400 years of experience in the IT industry. We've got huge challenges ahead. We've got to meet these financial targets. We've got to get our customers. How are we going to do that together? And basically, the leader draws their map exactly the same way as the others, but they always show their map last. So once people have drawn something that is controversial, they haven't got the leader on the map. They see a drought, they see a swamp, they see everybody falling off a cliff. The leader says, that's a really, really interesting point you make. So what it does is it gradually lets everybody feel, wow, I'm being listened to. And once people can feel they're being listened to, then you can start to have a flip chart. Let's go through the key points. Which ones do we want to vote on that we need to do? Which map do you think really best represents our future that we can all contribute to achieve those goals? So it's a way of creating a dialogue that is metaphorical, and therefore it is far less controversial and conflicting.
Dialogues are left out too many times, especially when you're trying to solve a problem or to get whatever it may happen to be. We just don't have that dialogue with the people we need to have it with.
We really don't. And you were talking about you're chasing submarines. I mean, you either find the submarine or you don't. Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, you know what the parameters are, whereas in business, it's all metamorphous sort of, what are we really trying to do? I mean, yes, we need to hit the sales targets. Why? What is it going to do for our reputation? What is it going to do for everybody? What is it going to do for the community? And somehow we have to, I think, remove ourselves from what we can measure into what we can feel.
Anthony, I feel like you just hit on a very key point, which is many times there are goals and objectives that are passed down the line, especially to the sales organization. And then the team hits their numbers only to find that the numbers have been increased and there's no explanation as to why the numbers are increased. And then you have to keep doing it. And then they lay off a big portion of the sales team and they bring in younger people because it's less expensive. And they wonder why there's no loyalty or why there's discourse in the organization, because it's not being communicated. And I can see how with this mapping that would be a big plus for every organization.
Oh, it's extraordinary for organizations to do it, but they've actually got to be honest and do something with the maps and what comes out. And that is the problem. That's always been my frustration. You run a magnificent day, you get to the issues, the elephants in the room, and everybody just ignores them because there's no consequence for ignoring them. Whereas if you were a Maasai and you saw a lion and you knew it was coming to eat your cattle, you know, if you didn't do anything about it, you lost your cattle, but there is no consequence. So it's how do we change perceptions that people realize what they really want to do is feel that they contribute. They've got the belonging, recognition, and those levels of trust.
Anthony, another great point that you made. And I'm wondering how much time is involved for this mapping, and are there any limitations? I know you're working with companies all over the world, so I would say probably not.
No, there are absolutely no limitations to what we do. I mean, normally it's good to work with groups of under 12, but I've run it with people for over 100. So it really depends on what is the problem they're trying to solve and then how we use it, which is why we have this training program that we take people through, whether it's for one-on-one coaching, whether it's a part of continued professional development, or it is for team coaching, because it all sounds very easy. Draw a map of the territory. It's actually learning the questions you need to ask. So what would you change on the map? Where are you comfortable on the map? What could we do differently? Who else could we bring onto it? So it sort of creates a language of its own. And I think what I love about this is, 25 years on, every single time I run a mapping session, I will see something different. I will hear something different. And at the end of every session, I'm going to go, I should have asked that question. I should have done it differently. Because once you say to someone, please draw a map of how you see your territory, you've fundamentally lost control of the meeting, because they're talking about the most important person in the world, which is themselves. And you've got to listen and respect that. So it's got a fascinating dynamic to it.
As I'm listening to you, I think of in the United States, a football team.
Yeah.
You have the map is the borders. You have the team. They know the responsibilities. They know what the goal is. They know everything about everything that's supposed to go on. They know where they contribute. Yeah. If they can't do it, there's somebody there that's backing them up. I mean, I think that's a perfect analogy for what you're describing. Yep. But we don't do that in anything outside of that to be any, it's just, we spend a lot of time, but we don't use those same concepts that you're talking about in other aspects of our life, personal or otherwise.
Exactly. I mean, on a football field, they're hunting the goals, they're protecting their own goal line, and they're growing their team, so they're going to be promoted and win the cup. It's simple. Surely business can be simplified, or our own lives can be simplified down to that.
Anthony, something that's coming up for me is I spent 20 some years in the loyalty and recognition business. And so when you talk about accountability, taking action, following through, how can there be measurable deliverables for people who are part of this mapping process? So not only do they draw the map, but they take responsibility and accountability for fulfilling their part of the process.
With great difficulty, and that has been my challenge, and that's really what I'm now asking people who are listening to this, who are coaches, who are consultants, who have that expertise to hold people accountable, because that is not my area of expertise. It really isn't. So that's why I want to work with people who have those disciplines and can actually hold the client accountable to what you said you would do. And we work on all sorts of different measures with companies. I'm actually putting together a whole measure to try to show how the mapping can improve all sorts of different measurements, physical and emotional and other ways of measurement. But measurement is so important, but so difficult to do because everybody forgets about it, apart from the figures.
Very true. Red, do you want to add something?
I was just thinking of some examples of my life where you suboptimize one aspect of a business so you can see good numbers, but the other part suffer because they were never included in part of the big plan. So it just too many times I see this happen, and you sit there and you shake your head, and you don't even see it right now. You see it 2 years from now, and it could have been easily predicted because humans are humans and egos are egos, and things get out of the way and somebody leaves. Oh, we can bring this back now that person's gone, because regardless. But yes, I see exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, and that's why we want to work with a consultant. That's why I'm so excited talking to you, Red, and also Dr. JACALYN, because we want to work with people who've got the relationships with their clients and then can say, look, let's get a map of what we're trying to do, first of all. Let's get everybody on the same map, round the same fire. What are we going to do? And then you hold them, right, we'll agree to do this by then and this by then. And you've then got that relationship. So you've then got an enhanced relationship, because once you've got your client's map, you ultimately have got access that no other supplier can have.
Anthony, you mentioned that you typically work with smaller groups, but you've worked with as many as 100. How are those people selected? If it's 6 people, does it matter the size of the organization? Are they in certain positions in the company?
It really, really doesn't. We had a fascinating time in Indonesia when we were working with the Central Bank of Indonesia. And we literally had the doorman and one of the governors drawing the map and how they saw it. It's been fascinating doing it at a homeless centre in Wrexham, in Wales, where you have all of the homeless people drawing their maps and then talking about how they can help each other cross the rivers and how we can give each other the shields and the hope and the belief. So it really works across all sorts of different. So the size and the scaling will all have to be done depending on what the organization is trying to do, how much it wants to embrace it. First of all, they've got to test it out. They've got to get ownership of the process. So it really is a case by case and where people's appetite for it is.
Thank you. That's helpful. So for anybody who's watching or listening, whether it's on the live or the replay, Anthony is here to help. We've got his contact information right here, which is his email address. He's also on LinkedIn. We are actually out of time for today, unfortunately. Anthony, what would you like to leave our audience with today?
As I started, there is no academic background to what I've been doing. It is simply things that people have been kind enough to invite me around their fires. And I think there is this ability in all of us to trust ourselves and trust each other. And that's what mental well-being is. It's getting people to talk to each other in a way that is building trust. And I don't think any way can build trust more than having a map of what are we all trying to achieve together, just as our forefathers would have done for the first 99.9% of our human existence. So I hope that's not too many last words.
That was fantastic. Thank you. And Anthony's email address is Anthony, ANTHONY, at Nomadic School of Business, NOMADICSCHOOLOFBUSINESS.com. Red, they have to enter me in the spelling bee. Okay, I'm kidding. All right.
We've been down that road before.
Red, how can people reach out to you? Sorry, Anthony, I'll come right back to you. Red, how can people reach out to you?
Easiest way is my website, redolaughlin.com. Red, like the color, R-E-D, O'Laughlin, OLAUGHLIN.com. On my banner, there is my phone number and my email address. That's the best way to respond to me. Just give me a call on the phone or send me an email. So redolaughlin.com. Thank you very much, Dr. JACALYN.
Thank you very much. Anthony?
Yeah, thank you very much. And Red, I hope it's only a matter of time, and Dr. JACALYN, until we're sitting having a couple of beers and talking about life and adventures and putting that record button of life really on.
For sure. Well, I look forward to hopefully meeting you in October when I'm over in London.
Fantastic. I look forward to it immensely. Thank you
All
very
right.
much.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Our next show is coming up. It's books, blogs, and poetry. We'll be right back.
Bye, y'all.
Thank
Bye.
you. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
See you soon.